She was just 17, a high school junior with a beat-up Toyota and dreams of getting out of Montgomery. Her name was Brianna Hill, quiet, soft-spoken, the kind of girl who wrote in spiral notebooks and stayed behind after class to help the janitor stack chairs. No priors, no attitude, just a broken taillight, and a bad stroke of luck on a Tuesday afternoon in May. That ticket should have been nothing. A $200 fine, maybe a court date, and a quick lecture from a traffic cop. But instead, it became the beginning of something darker, a secret that would unravel her life and leave blood on the Alabama soil. The courtroom she stepped into was small, windowless, and cold. But the man behind the bench made it colder. Judge Ellis Randall Boone, 54 years old, salt and pepper hair, tailored suits that hugged too tightly at the wrists. A man who spoke in measured tones, but wielded words like weapons. In Montgomery County, he wasn't just a judge. He was a symbol of order, of tradition, of control. The kind of man who could crush your future with a signature and sleep just fine afterward. To the public, he was impeccable. Married to Evelyn Boone, a professor of Southern history at the local university. They lived in a stately white-columned house off Carter's Mill Road, American flag flying crisp and proud on the porch. His lawn looked like a golf course. His daughters, both in college, were regulars on the dean's list. On Sundays, he sat in the front pew at Harmony Baptist, nodding solemnly through the sermons. To the outside world, Judge Boone wasn't just above reproach. He was untouchable. But Brianna didn't know any of that when she walked in that morning. She didn't know that the man behind the bench wasn't just watching the docket. He was watching her. Court transcripts show her case was supposed to be routine. Improper taillight. Failure to appear, no insurance. The kind of thing that usually ended with a fine and a warning. But something about Brianna made Judge Boone pause. He didn't just fine her. He lectured her about responsibility, about second chances, about the importance of being seen the right way in this world. Then, after dismissing the rest of the cases, he did something no one expected. He asked her to wait. The bailiff hesitated. So did Brianna, but she stayed, alone, while the courtroom emptied. What happened next wasn't in the official records. There was no note in the docket, no mention in the audio log, just a 14-minute window where Brianna was called into chambers for a private consult. The door closed. The cameras outside showed no one entered or exited. When Brianna finally emerged, her eyes were red, her hands clenched, her walk slower than before. She didn't say a word. That night, her mother, Carla Hill, noticed something different. The way Brianna sat at the dinner table but didn't eat. The way she kept looking at her phone, like waiting for something or someone. Carla thought it was stress. Exams were coming. Brianna had been juggling work shifts at a gas station on Maxwell Boulevard and studying for the ACT. She'd always been strong, responsible even as a kid, the type to check on her little cousins while the grown folks talked. But that night, Carla saw something in her daughter's face that she couldn't quite name. "I'm fine," Brianna said when asked. "Just tired." But her smile didn't reach her eyes. Judge Boone, meanwhile, went back to business as usual. The next day, he was photographed cutting a ribbon at a juvenile reform center. The day after, he led a local town hall about traffic violations and the importance of civic responsibility. Polished, poised, perfect. But behind the scenes, something had begun. A text, then another, a call from a private number. Words like "just checking in" and "you impressed me in court." Brianna didn't tell anyone. Who would believe her? He was a judge, a respected man, and she was just a teenage girl with a traffic ticket and a used car she couldn't afford to fix. Still, something about his messages made her heart race. Fear, confusion, maybe even flattery. She hadn't had a boyfriend since sophomore year. She barely had time for friends between school and work. And now here was someone powerful, someone with status, treating her like she mattered. He called her bright, said she had potential, said he could help. Help meant money, he explained. Help meant opportunities. But help came with strings. By the end of that week, Brianna had stopped answering her best friend's calls. She deleted her TikTok. She said she was studying more, but her grades didn't improve. Instead, she grew quieter, distant. Her manager at the gas station said she started showing up late, zoned out behind the register. Once, she went to the walk-in freezer and stayed there for 20 minutes. When asked why, she said she was cooling off. No one thought to ask what she was cooling off from. In the courthouse, rumors had long swirled about Judge Boone, whispers among interns and clerks, how he liked to interview female defendants alone, how he offered mentorship to girls barely out of high school. But no one filed a complaint. No one dared. Boone was too careful, too smart, too connected. And Brianna, she was too scared. When her mother found a second phone under her bed a week later, Brianna said it was for a school project. She smiled when she said it, but her mother later told police it was the first time her daughter's smile ever gave her chills. What no one could see, not yet, was that the trap had already been set. The judge had chosen his next victim. The first meeting in chambers was only the beginning. Brianna Hill didn't remember how the first message made her feel, only that it didn't feel like danger. Not yet. The phone number was unlisted. No name, just a few simple words. You carry yourself with grace. I'd like to help you. Sent 10:12 p.m., May 5th. She stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over delete. But something made her save it. Maybe it was the way the words felt like praise. Maybe it was how alone she'd felt lately. Between working shifts after school, doing homework past midnight, and coming home to a mother who was always 2 paychecks behind on rent. Or maybe it was something darker, something she couldn't admit. That text was the first in a line that stretched from curiosity to silence, from silence to fear. And the sender was the same man who'd stared down at her from a bench just 3 days earlier, Judge Ellis Boone. At first, the messages came with politeness, offers to help, a question about college applications, a reminder that her case was still pending and that he had influence. Then they started to shift, slowly but undeniably. You're very mature for your age. The way you look people in the eye, rare for someone so young. He asked for a photo. Just a smile, he said, something to brighten his day. Brianna didn't send one, but she also didn't block the number. She didn't know it yet, but that alone gave him power. By mid-May, Boone had convinced her to meet outside of court, unofficially. He framed it as a mentorship opportunity, a way to keep her from falling through the cracks, like so many other girls in her position. They met at a quiet diner 20 minutes outside town. He wore jeans, a baseball cap, and aviator sunglasses. Not the sharp-dressed man from the courtroom. Not the stern judge with the silver tie clip and spit-shine shoes. This version was more casual, relaxed, and somehow more unsettling. He paid in cash, ordered coffee, barely touched it. They talked for 40 minutes. He asked about her plans after high school, her part-time job, her mother. He made her feel seen, important. Then he offered her an envelope for the fine, he said. It held $300 in 20s. Brianna hesitated. Nothing comes free, she whispered, more to herself than him. Judge Boone just smiled. This isn't free. It's faith. Later that night, she wrote one line in her journal. I think I'm being hunted. The second meeting happened in a motel. Boone had already booked a room. Room 207 at the Whispering Pines Inn, a rundown spot just off Highway 231. The kind of place nobody asks questions. The kind of place you pay for in cash and park around back. He told her it was just to talk. That he didn't feel comfortable meeting in public. Too risky, he said. People love to make assumptions. She believed him. Or maybe she wanted to believe him. Because somewhere deep down, Brianna still hoped he wasn't what her instincts told her he was. But that night, everything changed. She came home with her blouse misbuttoned, her eyes glassy, her hands trembling. Her mother, Carla, saw her daughter step through the door and knew something was wrong. Mothers always know. But when she asked what happened, Brianna said only 2 words. Nothing happened. That became the pattern. The visits, the silence, the growing distance between who Brianna had been and who she was now. At school, her teachers noticed she was slipping. Assignments unfinished. Books left at home. One teacher, Mr. Landry, said she once stared at a blank page for the full 45-minute class period and didn't move. Just sat there, still, stiff, and somewhere else entirely. Then she started missing school altogether. Sometimes one day a week. Then two. Then whole stretches of absences with vague excuses. Stomach aches. Headaches. Family emergencies. None of it tracked. But the notes kept coming. Signed by her mother, who never wrote them. What no one knew was that Boone had given her a burner phone. No contacts. No call history. Just one name in the messages. E. He controlled everything. What time they met. What she wore. When she spoke. He told her she was special. That no one understood what they had. That if anyone found out, they'd both go down. By July, she was spiraling. Her journal entries turned darker. I don't think I'm real anymore. When I look in the mirror, I see his hands. My body isn't mine. And then the threat, it wasn't shouted. It wasn't even direct. But it shook her to the core. They were in the motel again. Boone had just handed her a new phone. Said her old one was compromised. She asked if she could stop. If they could stop. He tilted his head. Smiled. You'd let your mother lose her job over this? Think she can afford a scandal. That's when Brianna realized how deep his reach was. Boone had done his homework. He knew where her mother worked. Knew they were 3 months behind on rent. Knew the school Brianna wanted to apply to and the fact she hadn't yet submitted her financial aid. He reminded her that she still had an active case. One word from me, he said, and you're not just in debt. You're in jail. Brianna didn't cry in front of him, but she did once she got home. In the shower, with the water running, so her mother wouldn't hear. She didn't eat dinner. She didn't come out of her room. She just curled up in bed and stared at the ceiling. Carla knocked once, then twice. I made your favorite, she said through the door. Just come out, baby. We'll talk. But Brianna didn't open the door. She wrote something instead, on the last page of her journal. This doesn't end when I leave the room. He follows me home. And by then, it was already too late. Judge Boone had rewritten the rules. Behind closed doors, he wasn't a man in the robe anymore. He was something else, a shadow with a badge, a predator with power. And Brianna, she was drowning silently, day by day. No one heard her screams, because they didn't sound like screams. They sounded like silence. By late August, Brianna Hill had learned how to disappear in plain sight. She moved through the hallways of her high school like a ghost, eyes low, shoulders hunched. Her once bubbly laugh, gone. Her hair now always pulled back, her hoodie too big, as if she was trying to fold herself into something smaller. Something that wouldn't be noticed. But she had started to be noticed, not for her light, but for the way it had dimmed. Her best friend, Alea, whispered once in class, "You okay? You seem different." Brianna forced a smile. Just tired. But what she wanted to say was this. Something's growing inside me, and it's not just a baby. It's shame. She hadn't told anyone, not even her journal. She had bought the pregnancy test with cash, from the drugstore 2 towns over. She wore a hoodie, kept her head down, and slipped it into her bag between a bottle of water and a pack of gum. The cashier didn't even look at her. Maybe that was worse. Back at home, she waited until her mom was out on a double shift. She locked the bathroom door and sat on the cold tile floor for 10 minutes before she could even open the box. Her hands shook. She whispered prayers she didn't believe. When the second line appeared, dark and unforgiving, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared at it like it was a death sentence. And in many ways, it was because this child, this life inside her, wasn't born from love. It was born from fear, from manipulation, from power wielded like a weapon. It belonged to Judge Ellis Boone, and she knew without a single doubt he would never let be known. When she called him that night, she didn't say the word pregnant. She just said, "We have a problem." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. She imagined him in his study, pacing. probably swirling whiskey in a glass. The honorable man who people trusted with their lives, and now the father of a secret that could destroy everything. "Are you sure?" he asked. She didn't respond. "I'll take care of it," he said finally. That sentence echoed in her skull for days. Take care of it. She didn't know what he meant at first. She didn't know what he was capable of. But she would. 2 days later, an envelope showed up on her doorstep. No return address. Inside, $800 in cash, a burner phone, and the contact for a clinic in Mississippi. Boone had written only 2 words on a folded napkin stuffed inside. No paper trail. Brianna never called the clinic. She stuffed the burner phone into the back of her closet, buried the envelope in the trash, under banana peels and rotten chicken bones. And she sat on her bed for 2 hours, staring at the ceiling, hand resting flat over her stomach. She didn't want to be a mother. She wasn't ready. But something inside her refused to go through with it. Not like this. Not alone. Not hidden. But she also didn't know how to speak. Who would believe her? A troubled teenager with a shoplifting charge and absentee grades? Against a respected judge with 20 years on the bench? Silence, she thought, was the safest choice. But silence is weight. And by her second trimester, it was crushing her. She started sleeping in class. Her skin grew pale. Her ankles swelled. Teachers whispered in the break room about how she'd let herself go. One counselor asked if she needed a mental health referral. Brianna nodded, but no appointment was ever scheduled. Her mother, Carla, was working so many shifts that they'd become strangers in the same apartment. And when she was home, Carla was too tired to ask questions. She didn't notice the prenatal vitamins in the cabinet. She didn't hear the vomiting at 3 a.m. or the creak of the mattress when Brianna couldn't sleep. She didn't see that her daughter was shrinking beneath the weight of a life she didn't choose. Brianna took to walking late at night. Long walks. Just her and the silence and the moon. She'd talk to her belly, not like it was a baby, but like it was the only thing in the world that was truly hers. "I'm scared," she'd whisper, "but I don't want to be afraid of you." Sometimes she imagined what would happen if she told. If she went to the police, named the man who had taken everything from her. Would they believe her? Or would they tear her apart on the stand, just like he'd warned? Judge Boone kept his distance after pregnancy. No more motel visits. No texts. Just a single call every 2 weeks. Cold, clipped, rehearsed. "You've told no one?" "No." "Good girl." Those words made her skin crawl. She wasn't a girl anymore. She was someone else entirely now. A vessel for a secret. A slow-burning fuse. In early October, she finally broke. She walked into the office of Mrs. Cleary, her English teacher, who once gave her a copy of The Bluest Eye and told her, "You matter, even if the world pretends you don't." Brianna sat down, looked her dead in the eye, and said 6 words. "I need to tell you something." What followed was a slow unraveling of everything she'd held inside. The motel, the judge, the text, the baby, the silence. Mrs. Cleary didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She just listened. When Brianna was done, she stood up, walked around the desk, and wrapped her arms around her. "You're not alone," she whispered. But those words, kind as they were, would prove tragically false. Because less than a week later, Mrs. Cleary was placed on administrative leave for overstepping professional boundaries. No reason given. No hearing. And Brianna? She found a note slipped into her locker the next morning. Loose lips sink ships. Don't test me. No signature. But she didn't need one. Judge Ellis Boone had eyes everywhere. And as her belly grew, so did the fear. She wasn't just carrying a child anymore. She was carrying a target. By November, Brianna Hill had run out of places to hide. Every corner of her small Alabama town had begun to feel like a trap. The streets she once biked down carefree as a child now felt like surveillance lanes. Eyes followed her. Whispers lingered after she passed. There were no more safe spaces, only narrow margins of temporary relief. And the man at the center of it all, Judge Ellis Boone, hadn't spoken to her in 3 weeks. Not since the note in her locker. Not since she tried to fight back. It was a Monday afternoon when the final straw came. Brianna. 6 months pregnant and exhausted, walked into her house to find her mother sitting at the kitchen table, holding a crumpled paper in her trembling hands. It was her ultrasound printout, the one she thought she had hidden in the back of her closet. Carla Hill looked up, her face pale, her lips tight. "Whose is this?" she asked, even though her voice had already cracked beneath the weight of the truth. Brianna stood frozen. Her mind spun. "You're pregnant?" her mother whispered, as if saying the word too loud would shatter what little was left. Brianna nodded, barely. Then the tears came. Her mother wept, not out of anger, not even disappointment, but grief, for the child she thought she had protected, for the sign she missed, for the innocence that had been stripped away while she was busy working double shifts to keep the lights on. "Who did this to you?" she finally asked. And Brianna couldn't lie anymore. She whispered it, the name, Judge Boone. The silence that followed was thunderous. It felt like time itself recoiled. Carla's face contorted into a fury Brianna had never seen before. "Ellis Boone? The judge," she repeated, stunned. And then her voice rose. "That man is almost 50. Brianna, you're a child. He's a monster." Brianna collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing, trembling, confessing everything. Every motel visit, every text, every time he told her, "This is our little secret." But Carla didn't want secrecy. She wanted justice. She wanted blood. That night, Carla made 2 phone calls. First to a lawyer in Birmingham, and then to a woman named Leticia Ramos, an investigative journalist who'd exposed another Alabama official for embezzlement years earlier. Carla didn't trust the local police. They golfed with Boone. But that wasn't enough, because the next day, Carla's car tires were slashed. Then, a letter arrived in their mailbox with no stamp, just a warning written in thick black ink. Take one more step, and she disappears. Panic set in. Carla tried to pull Brianna out of school, tried to move them to her sister's place in Georgia. But they couldn't just vanish. There were legal processes, rent, transportation, prenatal care. And then, on the cold morning of December 3rd, Brianna woke up and found that the front door had been left open, wide. She hadn't heard it. Her heart stopped. She bolted to her mother's room. Carla wasn't in bed. The house was silent. For 10 agonizing minutes, Brianna searched backyard, bathroom, front yard. Nothing. And then she saw the trail. Red footprints, faint but fresh, leading down the hallway toward the basement. Her breath caught in her throat. She followed them slowly, every step a scream in her mind. At the bottom of the stairs, she found Carla, unconscious, bleeding from the head, a deep gash over her right temple, her wrist twisted unnaturally, a note pinned to her chest with a safety pin. "Stop talking. This was your final warning." Brianna screamed. The ambulance came. The police arrived. And for the first time, a real report was filed. But even then, no one said Boone's name out loud. Not the police, not the nurses, not the detectives who kept glancing at each other like they were afraid of the truth. Because Ellis Boone was a law in this town, and no one wanted to go against the law. But Brianna was done being afraid. In that hospital room, as her mother lay unconscious, Brianna reached for the burner phone Boone had once given her. She hadn't touched it in months. She powered it on, and what she found nearly made her drop it. Hundreds of texts, photos, voice memos. He hadn't deleted his tracks. He had just assumed she would never have the strength to use them. But Brianna wasn't the girl he met months ago anymore. She was a storm now. That night, she sent the entire data dump to Leticia Ramos. And within 24 hours, the story was live. Small-town judge accused of grooming and impregnating teen. Text messages reveal exploitation. It exploded across social media. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit. But in the town of Hopewell, Alabama, the reaction wasn't what you'd expect. Some called her a liar, a manipulator, a fast girl who seduced a good man. Others whispered prayers and offered casseroles behind closed doors. The courthouse denied all allegations. Boone took a temporary leave for health reasons. And Brianna, she stopped sleeping. She started locking every door, keeping a knife under her pillow. She knew this man. and she knew what he would do when cornered. That's why, on the evening of December 11th, when her front window shattered and two masked men burst into her home, she didn't scream. She ran, barefoot, pregnant, bleeding from glass cuts. She ran into the woods behind her neighborhood, heart pounding, lungs burning, the sound of footsteps chasing her through the trees. She hid under a fallen log, curled into herself. The only thing louder than her heartbeat was a thought that kept repeating in her head. This is it. This is how it ends. But they never found her. A neighbor, hearing the commotion, called the police. By the time officers arrived, the intruders had vanished, but the message was clear. This was no longer about shame or silence. This was war. And Brianna Hill was at her breaking point. It all came down to a courtroom, not a grand arena of justice like the ones Brianna Hill had seen in movies. No, this one smelled like mildew and cheap carpet. The paint peeled in the corners. The old ceiling fan clicked with every rotation. And in the front, above a polished mahogany bench, sat the man who had once told her she was the best mistake he ever made. Ellis Boone, now a disgraced judge, stripped of his robe, facing charges of sexual misconduct with minor, coercion, and conspiracy to commit attempted murder. The town of Hopewell had never seen anything like this. By the time the trial began in late February, Brianna was 8 months pregnant. She walked into the courthouse flanked by 2 state troopers and her attorney. The local police couldn't be trusted. Everyone knew that by now. Outside, protesters gathered. Some held signs that read "Justice for Brianna." Others called her liar. The divide was sharp. Some of Boone's church-going supporters, ladies who once praised him for donating to choir fundraisers, stood on the sidewalk with hands clasped, praying out loud for his deliverance from this smear campaign. Inside the courtroom, Brianna sat in the front row, directly behind the prosecution's table. Her hands rested protectively on her swollen stomach. She had considered staying away, to spare herself the trauma, but she had to see it. She had to finish it. The prosecution laid out everything. The texts, the photos, the burner phone logs, the DNA test that matched Boone to the fetus with 99.9% certainty, the hospital records showing her mother's injuries, the report from a neighbor who saw 2 masked men flee the house. It was a web of evidence, and the thread tying it all together was Brianna's testimony. When the time came, the courtroom fell into a heavy, pulsing silence. She stepped up to the witness stand. Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't lower. She spoke clearly. "He started when I was 16, she began. "He told me I was special. He said the world was unfair, and only people like us understood how to live above it." She described the motels, the cash under the table, the rides in his car with tinted windows, the lies she told her friends and family, the shame, the fear, the breaking point. And then she described the night her mother was attacked. The courtroom gasped when she mentioned the note. "Stop talking. This was your final warning." And when the defense attorney stood to cross-examine, the air turned cold. They tried to paint her as unstable, rebellious, a troubled girl with a history of exaggeration. They pulled up her social media posts, photos with captions like, "No one understands me." They showed her selfies and questioned her maturity. But Brianna didn't flinch. She looked the defense attorney dead in the eye and said, "Being immature doesn't mean I deserve to be raped." The courtroom froze. The judge struck the word rape from the record, claiming it was too emotionally charged. But it didn't matter. The silence that followed said everything. Then came Boone's turn. He wore a gray suit, no shackles, his salt and pepper hair combed neatly, his wedding ring still on. He pled not guilty, claimed the relationship was a fabrication, that he had only ever helped Brianna and her mother in times of need, claimed someone had hacked his phone, that the photos were manipulated. But the jury didn't buy it. They saw the pattern, the manipulation, the power imbalance, the violence. Leticia Ramos, the investigative journalist, testified, too, about the threats she received when she first published the story, about the anonymous calls warning her to stay out of Alabama business. Even Carla Hill took the stand, though her speech was still slurred from the brain injury. she sustained in the attack. With tears rolling down her cheeks, she looked at Boone and said, "You tried to take my baby from me, but you couldn't because she's stronger than you." By the time the trial entered its final week, Boone's defense had all but crumbled. The prosecution revealed surveillance footage from a local gas station near the Hill home on the night of the attack. It showed Boone's car circling the block at 2:03 a.m., his license plate clear as day. There was no way out now. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Brianna exhaled, her entire body trembling with a release she hadn't known she was holding. Her attorney grabbed her hand. Carla sobbed beside her. A wave of emotion swept through the courtroom like a tsunami. Some gasped, some cheered, some stood in silence. Boone was remanded to custody immediately. No bail, no goodbye, just a hollow stare as he was let out of the courtroom in handcuffs. But the story didn't end there. 2 weeks after the trial, Brianna gave birth to a baby girl. She named her Hope. The local newspaper ran a photo of Brianna holding her newborn in the hospital bed with a caption that read, "Hope born after justice served." But Brianna knew better than to believe that justice was truly served, because justice would have meant this never happened in the first place. Justice would have meant someone had listened the first time she cried quietly in the bathroom. Justice would have meant her mother didn't have to learn how to walk again. Justice would have meant a system that didn't protect monsters in black robes. Still, she took comfort in one thing. Boone was behind bars. His influence? Stripped. His title? Revoked. And his power over her life? Gone. But scars like hers don't fade easily. They live beneath the skin, in the quiet moments, in the nightmares. Yet Brianna faced each day with a kind of resilience most people only read about. She gave interviews, spoke at schools, worked with Leticia Ramos to help pass a new state bill, the Hill Act, which increased penalties for public officials who exploit minors under their jurisdiction. And she never changed her story. Not once. Because now people listened. And even if the justice system had failed her in the beginning, she had rewritten the ending herself. If the story shocked you, if it made you angry, heartbroken, or opened your eyes to how deep corruption and betrayal can run behind closed doors, don't stay silent. Subscribe to the Family Crime Exposed for more true stories that unravel the darkest secrets hidden within families, power, and trust. Like this video if you believe Brianna deserved better. Comment below, what do you think justice really looks like? These aren't just stories. They're real lives, real pain,